members of the Tren De Aragua migrant gang are pulling off armed robberies in Times Square. The gang members are staying at a city-funded Manhattan shelter. Per the New York Post, nearly 24 young migrants, some as young as 11 years old, part of a group that are committing brazen purse snatches and gunpoint heists, targeting locals and also tourists. They're often seen flaunting their weapons on social media. Now, a Detective Bureau assistant chief told the Post that these migrants have managed to evade jail because of their ages and the state's lenient criminal justice laws. The Post says the crew has about 21 members and has been busted for about 50 separate incidents with no one behind bars yet.
But is Tren De Aragua really taking over New York City as Republicans are painting it? Not that I see. Or is this just a way for the GOP to continue the Colorado-based Tren De Aragua story and fuel concerns about immigration? Maybe, instead, what we should be focusing on is the documentary film Separated, which showcases Trump's horrifying role in separating immigrant families at the U.S.-Mexican border. But unfortunately, for American voters, MSNBC acquired the film, and they announced that they would hold off on airing the film until a month after the election on December 7th. Why would MSNBC wait to air such an important film? Independent journalist Oliver Darcy speculates the decision was made by NBC News boss Rebecca Blumenstein, who is still hoping to persuade Trump to participate in a debate. Oh my goodness. I remember when Fox aired a documentary before the election on immigration related to Obama, and he was reporter-in-chief. I mean, he actually was pretty strong on immigration in terms of conservative standards.
Yeah, Separated has nothing specific about Trump. The same policies were in place before and continued long after. The only thing that ended was the outrage from progressives once this became the Biden separation policy rather than the Trump separation policy. In terms of the gangs in New York, again, this is reporting from the New York Post. These are statements from detectives, from police, that there have been a number of criminal incidents involving very young people who are living in a migrant shelter in the city, and there's nothing being done to keep them locked up. I don't think I'm the most tough on crime person in the entire world, but if you've committed 50 different robberies, maybe, then we don't just kind of release you back onto the streets. That is a source of frustration for me and probably most Americans, that nothing is being done to deter that on any level. Isn't this a problem?
There's a couple of things here as a New Yorker who was in Times Square yesterday. No New Yorker hangs out in Times Square, for those of you who ever go to the city. Do not think that Times Square is indicative of what the city culture is. We avoid it at all costs, but sometimes we have to transfer or commute there. It is a heavily policed area. It is policed mostly because of terrorism threats, and of course, Times Square on New Year's Eve is incredibly policed. You don't see that around there. The other thing is the police, the PBA, the Police Benevolent Association, is extremely conservative and very political, and the head of it was investigated by the FBI. There's a lot of problems in terms of when the police make statements and say that we don't have a strong criminal justice system. Just go to Rikers Island and see how many people who are at Rikers Island because they couldn't, pay to get out, and have the situation there of so many deaths and suicides and health complaints. I mean, we have a criminalized system in New York City. Do not believe what the news says, the media says. Eric Adams,
the fake news is the enemy of the people. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, right now it is. Disinformation is the enemy of the people. Politicized media. So, I'm not saying that
news sources saying this. We're just supposed to not believe them.
Well, New York Post doesn't have fact checkers, so I don't believe a lot of what New York Post says. It's very heavily editorialized. The Rupert Murdoch-owned company.
We don't believe the comments from New York Police Department Chief of Detectives Joseph Kenney.
No, I don't, because they have a history
These
of
Tren
making
De
false
Aragua guys
statements.
hide very well in plain sight in the migrant community. We aren't looking to grab the food delivery guy, but these guys go so far as to wear Uber Eats clothing, use delivery bags while they're out there committing their crimes. When we do arrest them, they're very eager to talk about the crimes they have committed, but they are unwilling to talk about Tren De Aragua itself.
And you know what? I'm not saying that Tren De Aragua doesn't exist. It exists, and that is something that fully needs to be dealt with. What I am opposed to is using a statement from a police officer who has the ability to bring that up in court, and guess what? These people were released in court. This isn't like they're just openly released based on some loose laws that we have in New York City. We don't have loose laws in New York City. We've had some evolution in terms of how inmates are released. Bail, cash bail, is a major problem in our city. There are folks who are being arrested for stop and frisk, for jumping a turnstile, and then they end up at Rikers and they can't afford to spend $1,000 out of pocket to get out of Rikers, and they're there for years under inhumane circumstances, and there's a suicide situation at Rikers right now. That's what the cash bails laws were about. They were not about minors, by the way, who were arrested, and the Police Benevolent Association has a politicized plot, which is very open in New York City. They are major funders of the Republican Party. They're major funders of and supporters of Donald Trump, and they are simultaneously using this migrant situation to gin up more support, which Eric Adams, by the way, was a huge supporter of theirs as a former police officer.
I don't think you should go to Rikers for a year for jumping the turnstile, although it should be enforced that you can't do that. This is how you get a tragedy of the commons. If there's no punishment or deterrence whatsoever for breaking minor crimes, eventually you have people getting away with major crimes.
Don't worry, they just killed somebody over jumping a turnstile. The police opened fire on the man, which also could have injured other people. I think that it should be free. Why are we dealing with a paid transportation? It's $2.50.
Okay, well, it should be whatever it is, but it's not free, and you can't.
Come on, we're not in a privatized state. This is
how are we Democrats take the position we're not going to enforce laws against crime, and yet we're somehow going to disarm the entire populace, and we have to have more gun control and all those things. If you're going to have laws, you need to enforce them. Democrats want to criminalize everything, but then do nothing about it. You have to take actual police action. You have to arrest people who break the rules you have. If you come up with more rules, there's no point. There's no point if you're not going to enforce it against, young people, people from lower economic groups, people from minority groups who are disproportionately committing all these crimes. Enforce it or don't make it a law. Fine, say anyone can jump the turnstile if they want. We're not going to have this be a law anymore. It's practically free. We're not going to do anything about it. See if that works out better, fine. But if you're going to have rules, you have to enforce them. And again, you can enforce them too harshly. I don't think we should shoot on sight people who do it, but it seems to me we can lock up in Rikers or wherever else people who repeatedly rob other people at gunpoint and knife point. They should be locked up.
They are locked up, and those are the
repeatedly.
people who are prosecuted. The issue with this is the PBA has a politicized agenda, and they have been investigated. They're being investigated.
It's not politicized. It's just if it's political that people care about crime and want it dealt with.
But that's okay. So this is the interpretation of crime. There's violent crime, which is being prosecuted, and people do, by the way, end up in jail over that. And then there is targeted crime. They've been investigated for targeting Black and brown communities over white communities who also smoke just as much pot, if not more.
I don't want to prosecute anyone. I want to make pot legal.
I want to make pot legal. The turnstiles
we agree on that.
Should not be a violent crime. Nobody should be arrested for that. They're mostly kids.
I agree.
And most New Yorkers don't agree with it. It's the PBA, which is basically headquartered in Long Island. These police officers don't even live in New York City. The majority of them live in Long Island, which is conservative Trump supporting. And they want to enforce their interpretation of what New York City should look like, and they politicize it, and they give to Republicans, and they support Donald Trump, and they would rather kill a black kid who jumps a turnstile.
This is a popular agenda that people can, I do not understand this philosophy. It has to be enforced, or there's no point.
Violent crimes are enforced. We should not have violent. We shouldn't be arresting people.
We have to stop the public disorder as well.
What's disorder? Most New Yorkers don't care if someone jumps a turnstile. In fact, I've jumped a turnstile before. It's the way it's targeted. Black and brown communities with stop and frisk.
It's not targeted. I would have you subjected to the exact same penalties for that as anyone else.
Being shot. Great. Thank you, Robby.
Not shot. No, nobody needs to be shot over it.
But the police are out of control in New York City. You know that. They have an agenda. They're being investigated for white supremacy. These are the guys who are enforcing these laws at whatever their interpretation is.
There were actual blanket racist policies like stop and frisk that were racist because they were without probable cause or reason, they were routinely stopping black people. That I am absolutely against. But it is okay to stop people if you've witnessed them commit a crime like jumping the turnstile. You stop those people, then you see if they have an illegal weapon, and then you prosecute them, and that's how you stop crime. If Democrats are uncomfortable with that, then they should just stop trying. But that's what it takes to actually deter crime, is you have to also enforce on some level the petty stuff. Not enforce it disproportionately, but you will find out that certain populations are responsible for a disproportionate amount of that crime. If you're uncomfortable with that fact, you should give up the whole project of having like a society and laws and governance at all, because it will end up being enforcing it on those populations.
If only we went off after the wealthy the same way.
All right, we gotta go. More Rising right after this.